In this episode, we are moving from planning into action because every security program eventually has to deal with the moment when a threat is no longer theoretical and the organization has to respond in real time. Incident handling, containment, and recovery are the parts of cybersecurity where preparation meets pressure, uncertainty, and business consequences all at once. For someone studying for the CISA Certified Information Systems Auditor (CISA) certification, this topic matters because it shows whether an organization can do more than write plans and policies. For a beginner, the most important idea is that a security incident is not judged only by how it started, but by how well the organization recognizes what is happening, limits the damage, restores operations, and learns enough to reduce the chance of repeating the same failure under a different name later on. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Incident handling is the organized process of managing a security incident from the moment it is recognized until the situation is brought under control and normal operations are restored. It includes assessing what has happened, deciding how serious it is, coordinating the right people, preserving useful evidence, limiting further harm, and moving the organization toward recovery without creating unnecessary confusion along the way. Many people assume incident handling is mostly about technical action, but that is only part of the picture. It is just as much about decision-making, communication, prioritization, and discipline, because a poorly coordinated response can worsen the incident even when skilled technical staff are involved. A mature organization treats incident handling as a business capability supported by technology, not as a purely technical emergency that only the security team needs to understand. One of the first realities of incident handling is that the organization rarely begins with perfect information. Early signs may include an alert, an unusual login, a report from an employee, unexplained system behavior, suspicious network traffic, or evidence that data has been accessed in a way that does not make sense. At that point, responders usually do not know the full scope, the root cause, or the true business impact. This is why early handling focuses so heavily on triage, which means making quick but careful decisions about what is most likely happening, what needs to be checked first, and whether the matter appears limited or potentially severe. Good triage helps the organization avoid two common failures at once, which are underreacting to a serious problem and overreacting to a routine event in a way that wastes time and interrupts normal operations without enough justification. As incident handling begins, one of the most important goals is to establish situational awareness. That means building a working understanding of what systems are affected, what users or accounts may be involved, what kind of threat activity is suspected, and what business functions could be at risk if the issue grows. Situational awareness is not the same as certainty, because early conclusions often change as more evidence appears, but responders still need a shared picture that is good enough to support immediate decisions. Without that shared picture, different teams may act on different assumptions, leading one group to isolate systems, another to continue normal activity, and another to communicate updates that do not match the facts. Strong incident handling, therefore, depends on disciplined information gathering and careful coordination so the organization can move quickly without becoming fragmented or contradictory. Another essential part of handling is assigning and maintaining clear responsibility during the response. Someone needs to coordinate the overall effort. Technical teams need direction about investigation and control actions. Business leaders need to understand what decisions may require their approval, and supporting functions such as legal, privacy, communications, and operations may need to engage depending on the nature of the event. If these responsibilities are vague, the response can slow down just when speed matters most. Or worse, several groups may act independently and create new problems while trying to solve the original one. Clear responsibility helps the organization decide who evaluates evidence, who approves disruption to business services, who communicates status, and who ensures that major decisions are documented. This matters greatly for CISA because control effectiveness is not only about whether tools exist, but whether authority and accountability are clear enough to support effective action during a live incident. Once the organization has enough understanding to act, containment becomes one of the central concerns. Containment means taking steps to stop the incident from spreading, reduce ongoing harm, and preserve the organization's ability to recover without allowing the threat to continue growing unchecked. It often sits at the difficult intersection between urgency and caution because the organization wants to move fast enough to reduce damage, but not so blindly that it destroys evidence, disrupts critical services unnecessarily, or tips off the attacker before responders understand the broader situation. Containment can involve isolating affected systems, disabling compromised accounts, blocking malicious communications, limiting access paths, or separating vulnerable assets from the rest of the environment. At its core, containment is about creating boundaries so the incident becomes smaller, more manageable, and less capable of affecting the wider business. A helpful way to think about containment is to distinguish between immediate containment and more stable containment. Immediate containment is the fast action taken to limit harm right away, such as disconnecting a device, resetting access, or restricting a system's communication until responders learn more. Stable containment is the more deliberate step that keeps the situation controlled while the organization investigates further and prepares for safe recovery. This distinction matters because rushing from detection directly into full restoration can be risky if the threat still has access or if key weaknesses remain open. Responders often need a temporary state where the damage is limited, evidence is preserved, and the business can operate in a constrained but safer mode while longer-term actions are prepared. For beginners, this is an important lesson because stopping the bleeding and restoring the patient are related goals, but they are not the same goal, and they do not always happen at the same speed. Containment decisions are also shaped by business context, which is why technical judgment alone is not always enough. Shutting down an affected server may seem like the safest move from a narrow security perspective, but if that server supports a critical hospital function, financial clearing process, or operational control system, the decision may carry serious consequences of its own. On the other hand, allowing an attacker to remain active just to avoid short-term disruption may lead to much greater loss later if data theft, sabotage, or lateral movement continues. Effective incident handling weighs these trade-offs carefully by considering the importance of the affected service, the likely path of the threat, the availability of backups or alternate processes, and the cost of delay. This is one reason cybersecurity is always connected to the business, because the right containment action is often the one that reduces total organizational harm rather than the one that looks most aggressive in purely technical terms. After the incident is contained well enough to prevent continued spread, responders usually turn greater attention to eliminating the cause of the compromise and removing what the attacker or threat left behind. Although the title of this episode emphasizes handling, containment, and recovery, this middle work is critical because recovery without removal of the underlying problem is often only temporary. If malicious access remains, if stolen credentials are still valid, if unsafe configurations remain unchanged, or if hidden persistence mechanisms were missed, then restored systems may simply become compromised again. This stage often involves cleaning infected systems, closing exploited weaknesses, changing credentials, improving controls, and confirming that trust can be reestablished safely. A beginner should understand that recovery is not just flipping systems back on, because the organization has to be reasonably confident that it is restoring operations into a safer condition rather than rebuilding the same vulnerability into the restarted environment. Recovery is the process of returning systems, services, and business operations to a normal or acceptably stable state after the incident has been controlled. This may sound straightforward, but it is often one of the most delicate phases because people are eager to resume business activity while responders still need to verify that restoration is safe. Recovery may include rebuilding systems, restoring data from backups, reintroducing services in stages, monitoring closely for recurring signs of compromise, and validating that users can return to work without reactivating the same risk conditions. A rushed recovery can undo good containment if systems are brought back before they are trustworthy, while a slow recovery can create unnecessary business loss if essential operations remain unavailable longer than needed. Good recovery is therefore deliberate, evidence-based, and closely tied to confidence that the threat has been sufficiently removed and that restored processes can operate without immediately falling back into the same crisis. One of the most important parts of recovery is validation. The organization needs to know not only that systems are online again, but that they are functioning correctly, that data integrity has been preserved or restored, and that the paths used by the attacker are no longer available. This may require technical testing, configuration review, access verification, log analysis, and close observation of system behavior after services are restored. Validation matters because incidents can leave behind more than obvious damage. They can create subtle integrity problems, unauthorized changes, weak points in identity management, or gaps in logging that are not noticed if the organization focuses only on bringing services back quickly. For someone preparing for CISA, this is a major point of control assurance, because true recovery means the organization can operate with justified confidence, not merely with the appearance of normality on the surface. Communication remains essential throughout handling, containment, and recovery because people across the organization need accurate information to make sound decisions. Technical responders need shared updates so their actions remain coordinated. Leaders need enough clarity to decide on business trade-offs, and affected teams need guidance about what they should or should not do while the incident is active. In some cases, outside communication may also be necessary, including updates to customers, regulators, business partners, insurers, or law enforcement, depending on the incident's nature and the organization's obligations. Poor communication can cause major harm even when the technical response is otherwise strong, because inconsistent messages can create confusion, damage trust, and lead people to take actions that interfere with recovery or evidence preservation. This is why incident handling must treat communication as an operational control, not as a side task to be handled casually once the technical work seems to be underway. Documentation is just as important, even though it may feel secondary during a fast-moving event. Responders need records of what was observed, what decisions were made, what actions were taken, when those actions occurred, and who approved them. Good documentation supports investigation, legal review, regulatory response, executive reporting, insurance processes, and most importantly, the organization's ability to learn from the incident afterward. Without solid records, teams may misremember the sequence of events, repeat earlier mistakes, or struggle to explain why key decisions were made under pressure. From an audit perspective, documentation also provides evidence that the organization followed defined processes, exercised judgment appropriately, and maintained accountability during a period when informal shortcuts and undocumented decisions are especially tempting. In other words, documentation helps turn a stressful event into a source of usable organizational knowledge rather than a blur of disconnected memories. A common misunderstanding is that the incident is over the moment the most visible symptoms disappear. In reality, the period after restoration is often where some of the most valuable work occurs, because the organization now has to ask what really happened, why the controls failed to stop it sooner, and what needs to change so the same pattern is less likely to succeed again. This includes reviewing root causes, identifying delays in detection, evaluating whether containment was fast enough, checking whether recovery priorities were well chosen, and deciding whether policies, training, architecture, vendor oversight, or governance need improvement. Organizations that skip this learning phase often remain vulnerable in the same basic way, even if the original malicious files or accounts have been removed. For beginners, this is a powerful lesson because security maturity grows not from pretending incidents should never happen, but from responding effectively and then using the experience to make the environment harder to compromise the next time. When you step back from the full picture, incident handling, containment, and recovery reveal themselves as a connected sequence of disciplined decision-making rather than three separate technical chores. Handling creates order and understanding in the middle of uncertainty. Containment limits damage and keeps the situation manageable, and recovery restores operations in a way that aims to be both safe and sustainable. Each part depends on clear roles, good communication, reliable evidence, thoughtful trade-offs, and a constant awareness that business impact matters alongside technical facts. For a new learner preparing for CISA, the most important takeaway is that strong response is not defined by panic, speed alone, or dramatic action. It is defined by whether the organization can move from confusion to control, from harm to stability, and from disruption to restored trust with enough discipline that the incident becomes a managed challenge rather than an uncontrolled business disaster.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.